happened was true. The most bizarre and brutal series of crimes in America.
Stop! Stop!
This is the movie that is just as real, just as close, just as terrifying as being there. Even if one of them survives, what will be left? The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. After you stop screaming, you'll start talking about it.
Okay, welcome to Movie Night Extravaganza / These Are Bad Movies, the crossover episode epidemic. I am here with my friendly neighborhood Texas co-host, J. Andrew World.
Hey, I just got done screaming, so I'm ready to talk about it.
With Amy Bell and Amanda Feriante from These Are Bad Movies.
And we're ready to talk about The Room.
Yeah, after the fact, I was like, because it just says bad movies intro, so I clicked that, and I was like, I'll surprise them, I'll have it ready, and then I was like, oh fuck, that's the one from The Room.
We were surprised.
Tommy Wiseau, he's here.
Tommy Wiseau's Texas Chainsaw Massacre would be an amazing movie, and it's like a whole. Everybody else in the movie is normal, and it's like a family of like it's Tommy's family. So Tommy's Leatherface.
What did you do to the door, Lisa?
You're tearing it apart.
Oh.
No, you're tearing me apart would be an amazing line after the after the Franklin murder, where he takes he saws the wheelchair in half. You're tearing me apart.
Oh.
We are also joined by our good friend R.C. Roberts, aka Charlie from Ferocia Animi. I never say it correctly at all, but
Ferocia.
I should know that because I'm Italian and I should know that it's pronounced that way, but you know, whatever.
I pronounce it Ferocia.
Oh, good Lord. God damn Americans.
Italian Americans, Charlie.
What?
You know, fettuccine anime. Fettuccine Alfredo, the Substack that
Fabio Anime.
Well, at least I'll have something good to eat while I'm writing.
Yeah, Alfredo is not one of those things.
That might be your very flawed opinion.
It's not Italian.
These are bad pasta.
Yeah. I'd host that show.
So I wanted to start with this. It's a couple minutes, but it's gives the background on Ed Gein, who both Ed Gein, whatever the pronunciation is. No, I thought it was Gein because I watched this and they said, but anyway.
I think most people pronounce it Gein, but its actual pronunciation is Gein.
All right, before we do that, I'm going to give us a little bit of the These Are Bad Movies formatting here and say, hey, we all watched the movie. Did we watch it? Did you watch it? Did you watch the movie?
What happens if you're live and someone just goes, no?
No.
We all watched it.
Just eject them.
Yeah, you're no longer here.
Pulls the Cole James Cash. We finally got him on, and he's like, all right, let's talk about this movie I haven't watched.
Oh.
All right. And then someone, one of you lucky people, has to summarize the plot.
I mean, that's easy enough.
Nose goes, you know.
I'll summarize the plot.
There you go.
Go for it first.
So the plot of Texas Chain Saw Massacre is that 5 friends are traveling on a road trip through Texas after it's found out that that all these graveyards have been robbed. And there's a brother and sister, and the brother's very annoying and in a wheelchair. And their grandfather, they're trying to find out whether their grandfather's grave's been robbed, and then go to his house for whatever reason that's deep in rural Texas. And on the way there's a gas station, and the car runs out of gas, which of course, horror movie, the car is always running out of gas, or the van is always running out of gas.
There's a hitchhiker before the gas station.
Oh yeah, is that before the?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, so they stop and pick up a hitchhiker who's extremely weird and has a knife, and cuts himself with one knife, and then pulls out a second knife and takes a picture of them, and then burns the picture in a paper thing, and they kick him out of the van, and he runs past
tinfoil, Forrest. You make hats out of it.
Yeah, but there's something else in there that's not just tinfoil. It's not just burning it.
It's gunpowder. Yeah.
All right. See, I'm not a Texas person. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, don't you burn photos with gunpowder in the rest of the country? I mean, come on. That's like what we do. That's just high school.
Oh god.
Oh yeah, I
snorted.
Might plead the fifth, I guess.
I was gonna say it's the only way the tinfoil hat protects you. You got to put some gunpowder in there.
Yeah, I enjoyed making fireworks as a teenager, like actual fireworks. So I made gunpowder from scratch.
Oh.
And then
Very
went
fun.
to a gas station and ate some barbecue.
That's where you eat the barbecue.
And then you showed up at your grandpa's house?
Yes.
And did some exploring.
After being told by the gas station guy, you don't want to go to no old house. Bad things. You can get hurt in them old house.
People don't like trespassers.
Yeah. So, of course, immediately they trespass on the next house, not the grandfather's house. And, first the first couple disappears, and you find out that they've been chainsawed to death by a random person, but nobody knows that. And so, the next guy comes looking for them. And, he also meets Leatherface, the old chainsaw, hacker. So that leaves was it the brother and sister left at the end, or was it
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it leaves the brother and sister at the end, and finally it gets dark out, and they finally decide to go looking for everybody else. And out of nowhere, Leatherface pops up with this chainsaw, saws the wheelchair in half that Franklin's sitting in, and Sally gets away, runs away all the way to the gas station that she started at. And you think she's going to be safe, or, you think something, maybe she'll get rescued or something. But no, it turns out the gas station guy that told them to stay away from old houses is, I realized today, I think he's the father of the hitchhiker and Leatherface. At first I was like, is he a strange brother? Because there's all the like incestuous relationships going on. But watching that documentary, they said there's 3 generations of people in the house. So it would assumably be that the brother is the hitchhiker and Leatherface, and then the gas station guy's the father, and then there's obviously grandpa. And so he kidnaps her, brings her to the house, picks up the hitchhiker, because I guess he just hangs out and waits for anybody to pick him up. And they go
near the house. He'd been walking.
Yeah. Well, I think he was at the graveyard.
He'd just come back from the graveyard.
Yeah.
Because he had
That's where they found him.
Hobby.
Yeah. So they go to this house, and it's full of pieces of dead bodies, and there's a dead chicken in there, and there's you think it's the grandpa's dead, or an old man and a woman, but you find out that it's actually alive. Like the grandpa's still alive, and he has a face mask thing on, and
which is supposed to be his face.
Yeah. So they said, but he's preserved. It's very
well, he's close to being the way grandma is.
Yeah. All right. Well, so they have them all down for dinner, and they're all sitting around, and they get the idea. First, the hitchhiker's taunting the father, and telling him he's nothing but a cook, and the father's saying, I don't like killing, and he's like, yeah, you're good for nothing, you're just the cook, and he's taunting his father, really just trying to crawl up the alpha position, I guess. And
the whole time Sally is tied to an armchair, literally.
Yeah,
there's arms on the chair.
Yeah, literally an armchair. And they get the brilliant idea that it's time to kill her like cattle with the mallet that they hit the cattle with. That's the grandpa's original job, is to, he's the cattle killer, and
it's
they're
kind
upset.
of the through line through the whole movie.
Yeah.
And he's the best killer because he only needs one hit to kill the cows, whereas everyone else takes 2.
He killed 60 in 5 minutes, and he could have done more if they could have dragged those cows away.
Yeah. They're gonna kill her using Grandpa after he's already sucked on her finger, real gross and nasty.
With real blood. That was a real cut, real blood in that.
Yeah. No, the entire movie is disgusting.
Yeah. No, they couldn't get the blood packs to work. And so she's like, fine, cut my finger.
Oh, no, the whole movie's nasty.
Yeah.
And the shooting of it has to be nastier than the actual movie in a lot of cases, because she's really getting the shit beaten out of her every single time. And there's that documentary that I was watching. The guy that plays the father is saying, well, all of them are saying, we didn't really feel comfortable like hitting her, but then all of a sudden, like after a while, after like take after take after take, they started getting like bloodthirsty, and
having a lot of fun. Right? Yeah, he described it as fun to beat the grandpa.
Yeah. And
well, before really getting into it, how does the movie end?
The movie ends that she manages to jump through a second window. There was a first window that she jumped through earlier in the movie, and starts running.
Going through those windows.
The hitchhiker and Leatherface are both chasing her. All of a sudden, the truck from the cattle, the slaughterhouse, shows up and just runs over the hitchhiker and flattens him into the ground. So she has one person that she's no longer running away from, but then Leatherface is still chasing her. The guy gets out of the cattle driver, gets out of the truck. He's chasing her and like both of them around and around and around. Finally, the guy takes a knife, throws it into Leatherface's.
I thought it was a wrench.
It's a wrench.
It might have been a wrench. So he hits him. The chainsaw starts going through Leatherface's leg, but he grabs it at the last second, just as it cuts, which was the real chainsaw, I think. But they had a blood pack, and it just, I guess it burned the guy that actually, Gunner, that played Leatherface. It actually burned his skin. So she manages to get into another truck, and so does he. And Leatherface is left going like this, like
with
it's
the
some
original,
kind of
with the first truck driver.
Yeah, they leave the truck driver that saved her life.
Yeah, he runs down some random area and we never see him.
Yeah, like they're just like, this guy doesn't matter.
And somehow, even with that ending, there's sequels.
Yes.
You think the cops will be on that place so fast after that? Like, no,
so many sequels.
Well, they kind of restarted the thing after 4, like the continuity, and I think there's like 3 continuities now. Or no, then they got rid of all the sequels and whatever. It's all confusing. The sequels aren't that good. They're diminishing returns. Although 4 has a special place in my heart because Matthew McConaughey, who plays the new cook, it goes full Nicolas Cage in that movie.
Texas's new governor.
Yes.
Kidding.
Yeah, it's not a good movie, but it is worth it alone just for Matthew McConaughey's performance.
I've seen some pretty bad movies for some pretty bad actors. So
and Renee Zellweger's in it too. So like 2 good actors. This is both before they were famous.
They wanted to. Renee Zellweger had a big movie coming out. They wanted to market this Texas Chain Saw Massacre at the same time that they marketed her new movie, so she would be like an established movie star.
Well, first they shelved it because they thought it sucked.
And probably right. I haven't seen it, but my guess is they were right.
Yeah, Matthew McConaughey was like kind of then immediately because the next movie he did, which I think was The Client or whatever, was a Grisham film. That was kind of his big breakout role. So he was a star, and then Renee Zellweger did Jerry Maguire, and they're like, well, we got to put this out now.
Wow.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was Jerry Maguire that was the movie. That's crazy. And Matthew McConaughey was involved in it as like a passion project because it was Texas. They were like, yeah, he was really gung ho about wanting to be in Texas.
Yeah, he was going to be the biker, but then they cut the whole scene for the whole character of the biker, and he's just like, fine, I'll be the guy at the gas station. Let me in, and just goes ham.
Oh my word! So does anybody like this movie? Is this anybody argue that this is a good movie?
See, but this is the thing that I feel like we come to every single time, because I think that I don't want to argue whether it's a good or bad movie.
Before
wait. But I want to say that the thing that it's supposed to do, it very successfully does. The thing that it's supposed to do. The thing that it's supposed to do is be disgusting and scare the shit out of you. Really, that's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
At what point did you become so scared you defecated? Where in this movie did it really frighten you?
Well, but it did like we went to some haunted houses here locally last weekend, and the butcher in the meat shop that has human meat is a really common theme in commercial haunted houses.
Yeah.
Maybe part of it is that we've seen it so much that it doesn't have the kind of impact that maybe it did before. That was just like, oh, there's a Halloween trope,
See, I didn't even feel like it was necessarily a Halloween trope. I kind of just went with it and allowed the moral, I guess not moral, the logic of the movie, I guess, to take over. And I just kind of went with it and decided I was going to let it just, make me feel incredibly uneasy and nauseous. And I don't know. I think that the thing that it did, I mean, especially in the 1970s, but like even now, I think the thing that it's supposed to do is it's not meant to be a good movie with a plot that you're like, wow, because none of it really fucking makes sense. They don't explain anything to you. It's just kind of is what it is. They're putting it in front of you and saying, here, let's try to scare the shit out of you. And I think it does that well. I think that it makes you feel unnerved, as if you're watching, one of those like old movies about an asylum, like documentaries about an asylum or something, like where you just kind of feel gross after leaving it. And like, that you can see that they haven't treated anybody there very well. And like, it's like you're left kind of feeling like dirty after watching it. And like, that's how I felt watching this. I felt very nauseous. I felt kind of just kind of disturbed. And I felt like, I don't know. I felt like it successfully did what it set out to do. Now, is it a good movie? I'd say no. But
okay.
Yeah, it's part of like exploitation films, which are supposed to make you feel nauseous and dirty, and and none of them are good. They have their moments. I mean, like, I Spit in Your Grave, the castration scene, classic. But exploitation films are not meant to be enjoyed. They're meant to be kind of like to see what kind of like what you're made out of, in a way. And it's hard to enjoy. Oh, and
you
God.
really see what
and
you're.
I
made
watched
out of
too many of them
movie.
in college,
Just,
so
your body parts are everywhere. You really see the inside of people. So I think in that sense it works. I think it works very well as an exploitation film.
Yes.
I don't think that if you're looking at it in terms of a movie with a coherent narrative, in terms of a movie that's filmed well, it's not. It's filmed amateurishly. I mean, maybe partially on purpose, and I think also partially just, they just.
But it also really does set up tension well. Like there's a lot of tension that's done very well. The way it's shot.
Yeah. And
so,
I think a lot of that is also that they don't show you the gore in it, really. Like,
yeah.
Well, I mean, they talk about cuts and things that people tried to make to it to make it have a lower rating or viewable overseas, and they didn't show the gore on screen. They saw, Leatherface or him holding and bringing down the chainsaw is the word. But I mean, even putting what's her name, Pam or whatever her name was, up on the meat hook, you just see her reaction to it.
Yeah,
you're not seeing any of the wounds. And there's
in the same way that Psycho did that with the shower scene. you assume that you've seen her get stabbed a whole bunch of times, and when you actually watch it back, you haven't actually seen the knife ever go in.
Exactly. So they weren't able to cut footage to bring down the rating because it just wasn't in there.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing is that Tobe Hooper, or the director of it, went to the MPAA at the beginning of filming and said, what can I show and still get this movie cut for TV? See, because the point of it is, once again, not to be a good movie. It's to be something that he can market and say, I scared the shit out of these people and I should make more horror films as like an amateur director. So he went to the MPAA like ahead of filming and was talking to them the entire time and was just like, hey, can I show someone going up on a meat hook? I have a clip of him talking about it where he's like, can I show someone up on a meat hook? They're like, no. And they're like, can I show their reaction if it's implied that they're on a meat hook? They're like, I guess. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we've never really had anyone ask that question. That's weird.
You're weird. Get away from me.
So he never wanted to show any of the like even Franklin, getting sawed in half. You see the chainsaw.
The camera's directed at Leatherface the entire time.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, did you like it?
Did you think it was a good movie?
I'm looking at you going, you were into this.
No, I did not like it. I approach this movie the same way that I approach literature. In that I think that all narrative art is kind of an ecosystem of different things that are working together, or if it's really bad, working against each other.
So is this a 50 Shades of Grey kind of thing, or more like
Twilight? Grey was,
that's a different movie.
No. I was gonna say I don't know how to answer that question. No comment. But for me,
if that's what you're into,
there's better movies.
If you watch Texas Chain Saw Massacre and we're like, hey, I guess this is what people watched 50 Shades of Grey for.
I 50 Shades of Grey did not cross my mind, not once.
I was talking to Andy.
Yeah.
Well,
he's in literature, so I'm like just trying to think of crappy novels to compare it to.
Okay, different.
Either way, usually in narrative art, I think there's 4 different aspects that are important, which is obviously the narrative, the characters, the setting, and the dialogue. And this movie fails in 3 of those 4 areas, and it does okay in one of them.
Setting?
Yes.
Hey.
Setting. Yeah, setting. Because the narrative, as you all pointed out, sucks. It doesn't make sense. It's rather random. I mean, she jumps out a window twice.
I like that she jumped out of a window because.
By the way, Andy, it's not 50 Shades of. It's not 50 Shades of Grey. It's 50 Shades of.
There's more plot in this than in 50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
I do.
50
We
Shades of Grey
know.
matter?
We're telling you. There's
no.
more
It's it literally says.
50 Shades of Grey.
Yeah.
It literally says G, and then it seems like there's supposed to be an R that's missing, but it says gay on the truck. That.
Well,
what's that? No. You all totally derailed me. I was maybe supporting Charlie here. Now I don't remember.
I was talking about how bad the narrative was.
I mean, I think the characters all went through. The characters from the beginning of the movie are not the same characters at the end of the movie, mostly because they went from alive to dead. So there was some growth there. There was an arc that you could see.
God, it's. I can't even agree with that, but I mean,
but you want to look at him.
You're not dead.
No, I don't want to. I just, I don't see any growth. Because I was going to say the characters to me are pretty 2-dimensional as well. So as far as growth, it's like flipping over a piece of paper. It's not that much growth. But yeah, no, 2-dimensional. There's not a lot. I was. At one point I was rooting for the cannibals because the characters are just awful. And
listen,
it's like
they're a rural family. They're suffering from deindustrialization. All of a sudden,
and a home invasion. Yeah,
there's an air gun, right? And they lose. The grandpa loses the career that this family has been building for generations. All of a sudden, they don't have that free head cheese anymore. What do they do? You know what I mean? They got to go to
right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? To get their hobbies together.
I mean,
they got to go kill people. The people have got to be the head cheese. They don't have that free access anymore. They can go hang out, at the slaughterhouse all they want, but at some point they're going to be like, "We've given you all the free head cheese you're going to get." I thought great hero.
I guess you could take that view. I was just sympathetic because I hated the characters.
And you have that humanizing moment with Leatherface after the shows up
when he sits down.
Yeah. Why? How many?
Well, and also, the character development of the cannibals is more palpable.
Mm-hmm.
You see the gas station guy go in and start hitting people with brooms, and you're like, well, these people are basically being abused, or so it's implied in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And so, they have a different kind of development than the characters. I swear to God, if I had to hear more about Zodiacs, I was going to slit my wrists. It also teaches you don't trust people who like Zodiacs.
They also the gas station guy said, don't go messing around in the old houses. Some people don't.
I was going to say he gave the best advice of the movie, and nobody listened. I was watching it with my sister, and I turned to her at one point. I said, "Look, it pays to be an asshole. You just drive right past whoever's on the side of the road. Don't worry about it. Just keep going." So, characters are pretty 2D. In fact, the villains are more developed. The setting for me was the better part. There was an attempt at, authentic setups, with
I would give the settings more than just an attempt. They had rotting, like dead animals.
Right. Well, I was about to say.
I thought the setting was so over the top hokey.
Yes, that's why I say an attempt at authenticity. It's not that they didn't try.
How do you create like an authentic
Blair Witch? It looked like an early iteration of what would become Satanic Panic.
Yes.
It looked like they were trying to make an occult reference.
Well, that's because they're working for the Illuminati. If you see part 4, you see this is all your questions are answered by Matthew McConaughey
all the time.
They're making a cult reference.
Yeah, it's
bones and the
it's Ed Gein though. He's just an interior decoration.
Right.
Yeah, but did Ed Gein
friend of show Ed Gein
that? Because everything I've heard about Ed Gein is that he did he used bones as decor, but they were using them as talismans.
Yes.
They had an occult aspect to it. They were leaving them as symbolic warnings at the porch.
Right.
They were hanging in ways that were
but that's just because they don't want people coming on their porch.
I mean, it's a cross between a mildly well set up Halloween store and redneck nightmare, basically.
But see, all these things are like in the horror genre, I feel like are tropes developed because of and after Texas Chain Saw Massacre.
That might be the case.
It's such a bad movie. This is why it's such a bad movie, because it does set up. It does have that proto.
Which I watched it back to back last night with Blair Witch.
Oh God. Blair Witch.
And there was a full moon, and it was creepy, and I was alone in my basement. And we
did Blair Witch 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's a movie.
This one is more interesting than Blair Witch.
Yeah. But
Blair Witch 2 is more interesting than Blair Witch, but
this sets up a satanic panic narrative with occultists being on the rampage and murdering people. People actually went to jail because the public started to believe that nonsense.
That's true.
It also does that hillbillies are scary trope.
Yeah, like Deliverance almost.
And I don't know that I've said this to any of you, but I am a hillbilly on both sides of my family. My people come from the hills. That's
from the Hollis?
Yeah. Well, no.
Ozark.
No, we're Ozarks.
Ozark. Okay.
We're Ozark people.
Yeah, you're not hearing the full accent right now. It comes out around other accent.
Yeah, I slip in and out. Like I can really get very hillbilly in my speech patterns.
Yes, she can.
And sometimes
we should have had you on for A Nightmare on Elm Street. There was I noticed everybody slipping into accents back and forth throughout that entire episode.
But yeah, like we've talked about the representation of a bunch of different people. I know that people have opinions about how Italian Americans are presented, for instance. They're usually portrayed as behaving badly in a really fun way.
Well, that's just the movies I favor.
But the hillbilly representation is so bad, and that's the portion of America that we're really losing in the narrative as well. We are allowing them to be propagandized from the right, and we've allowed them to be propagandized from the right without any like good influence from more sensible minds.
Yeah, we need unions out there, like in the
before the Civil War. I mean, like most of these people have some sort of like adherence in the family, probably have Confederates in the family, but probably didn't actually have the like wealth and privilege that came with the systems there. They were the poor white people that were upholding chattel slavery because they were told that it was better for them somehow, and it wasn't. I mean, they are the group that was consistently put on the back burner through like every point in history.
Well, and the whole idea of inbreeding and living on the family land and the old house and the developmental disabilities and all that stuff. That's a long-standing negative stereotype, especially in horror.
And look, I had family members that really enjoyed taxidermy. Okay, like
I like knives. I was really mad during the hitchhiker scene. I'm just like, this movie hates creepy people.
But yeah, like a lot of the like
I wouldn't. I mean,
in my family, like they'd have like taxidermied frogs that were like using a toilet. Like it's very
not like Psycho at all.
No. But definitely
his birds, the birds in Psycho.
None of them used the toilet though.
No, they didn't.
Yeah, but I mean, like
it's one toilet at a time, really, in film.
Yeah,
I grew up in California, but my parents grew up in rural areas in the middle of the country, and even in California, we had taxidermy in the house. Not to say I love taxidermy, but it's not a signal of you're gonna get it.
Yeah, I guess I have a pretty high tolerance of taxidermy, and to have it presented as like, oh, this is a signal that you should get out of there, like it just doesn't code for me. You know what I'm saying?
It's an easy way to creep people out because in cases especially where they're doing movies based on Ed Gein, who is someone who did learn how to taxidermy so that he could, so he could specifically do that. So by having these first, because they're first really the first serial killer movies. I mean, it's Psycho, like this, and based around the same serial killer, and then also Peeping Tom, like movie, like, you know what I mean. So it's the beginning of a whole genre of serial killer movies.
Yeah, I don't think you can call this one a serial killer movie though, because
I'm saying the fact that it's inspired by so it's inspired by the same serial killer that inspired Psycho.
Whether or not he's a serial killer is even sort of a question based on my memory of his
He's
story.
a killer.
He's a killer, and I would if you
she questions whether he killed more than one.
Yeah.
All right, so he confessed to killing 2. And then throughout his entire house, both stuff from graves were found, but also disappearances have been taking place around his home for a very long time. And they didn't bother to really ask him. I listened to the whole story the other night on multiple true crime podcasts, which, by the way, I feel like I've suffered for my art because I fucking hate true crime podcasts. They are the worst genre of podcast. And Halloween,
could be
2018.
Worse than Jordan Peterson.
Yeah,
all right, not worse than Jordan. All all right, maybe philosophy podcasts a lot of times are worse than, but you know what I mean. So like so he is
Horse is going to alienate all his audience. Like, let's just get them all. Come on.
No, he's believed to have killed a lot more than what he confessed to, but they got the 2 murders. They got him to confess to the 2 murders, and they kind of just said, you know what, like this person's gonna end up in an asylum anyway. He's literally like, you know, half the time thinks he's in communication with his dead mom. Like, let's get him put away for those 2 murders, and they didn't really push the other ones. But it's believed that there were just constant disappearances around there, and like some of it could just be Texas or not Wisconsin stuff, because it was in Wisconsin, it wasn't Texas. But like, you know, like whatever they have up there, bears.
I am actually an honorary Wisconsinite too. I did a web comic for a while about Wisconsin, and one of the former senators christened me an honorary Wisconsinite. So, as you know, so as an honorary Wisconsinite, yeah, weird things happen in the woods there.
Yeah. So in this movie though, like there is a lot of human remains. I guess there's arms. I guess you could say like fully fleshed arms that probably didn't come from
armed robbery.
Okay, I'm on board with serial killing in the movie, I guess.
Well,
yeah, I mean, I think
again, they go off. The takeaways from the Ed Gein story that come into the movies based on him is oftentimes like men who show any amount of feminization are so sick in the head as to be violently dangerous to every single person they meet.
Yeah, you see it in Psycho when he inhabits Mother, and you see it in here too,
because Leatherface puts on his lady face for dinner.
Yeah.
No, he's supposed to be the grandmother.
And 4, they take it to another level. I mean, like, you know, I'm sorry, I seem to be a big fan of 4 tonight.
There's a lavender panic, right? Like it's happening on and off throughout this entire time period where, you know, gay men are treated as something that you should be terrified of. Bachelor single men that have spent their lives that way.
It was like in the DSM thing, the manual for psychologists.
DSMV.
Yeah. So it is.
Because V is the 5. Never mind. Sorry. DSM.
There's definitely an element of that in all of these movies, and you know, kind of in some ways reminds me of like the Gimp in Pulp Fiction is kind of a similar character to Leatherface in this movie, in the sense of like, you know, like he's like Leatherface seems like the far more like effeminate kind of masked like person that you know is in that feminized role within this family unit, which makes
and is the one that does the killing
and has the high voice.
Sounds like Beaker from the Muppets. Yeah. That took me out of it. And the final scene where they're running around the truck, but he's not very fast, so it's like she's able to just like outrun him around the truck. That completely took me out of, because I was nicely creeped out by the house. It was over the top, but I also, you know, attribute that. I mean, maybe it's my, you know, New York prejudice. Like I see something like that and I'm like, you know what, this is like, it makes sense. Like it's like, you know, Texas overly kitsched cannibalism. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so maybe that's my own prejudice taking over.
Yeah, wait till you get to upstate New York. I mean, real upstate New York. I went to college in real upstate.
I lived in Lake Placid for a year and a half, but it doesn't
further.
It doesn't go really further than that.
Oh wait,
Canada.
Late.
Yeah. Oh shoot! I'm sorry. I was thinking of. Never mind.
I lived in a.
The alligator is.
I lived in a boys' home in Lake Placid for a year when I was a teenager. That's a long story.
Y'all haven't seen Lake Placid? That's a bad movie.
Yeah, no, I've seen. Yeah. But so I yeah, it's also like that. I mean, it's assumably up there, but like in a similar way, I guess maybe it's my own, you know, like hick countryside prejudice.
Exactly.
In this.
Exactly. And come on, back me up, Texas.
But this movie also is
offensive
kind of,
to our people, Texas. Come on.
This movie kind of
Well, the problem is like what's happened with Texas is all these people from the Midwest has moved down to Texas and has ruined the state. To get people like Ted Cruz, who's a freaking Canadian from Cuba.
Yeah, like Midwesterners are.
Exactly. All Midwesterners are Canadians from Cuba. No. But no, like there's a what's his name? The guy running for governor who's not Matthew McConaughey. I call him G.W. Bridge because he looks like a comic book character named G.W. Bridge. That's not his name. Alan West. Like Alan West ain't from Texas. I don't even think he was from Florida. But now he's got a cowboy hat and running for governor. And half the Texas Republican congressional people are all people who from the like Wyoming, North Dakota. It's like so they can go down there and cosplay as cowboys. Like, come on, get real.
Wyoming is the cowboy state, or friendly cowboy, or whatever it's called. That's their like motto, is something cowboys. They got cowboys in Wyoming. You're talking crazy stuff, Andy.
Yeah, but Texas has the
reputation. I know.
Yeah.
This
Texas
movie
has the Vaccaro still.
But like the thing is though, is they still have like it's very like it's cosplay because you actually can see some of these people move from parts of the country doing commercials like in different parts of the country that are geared towards different stereotypes of wherever they happen to be running from, and then going to Texas and putting on a cowboy hat and be like, we're Texas tough, and like, bullshit, get out of here.
Yeah, but they're not putting on Leatherface
here.
and pretending to have a psychosis.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like that was trying to rep Texas in that too.
Oh, I think Joe Rogan's.
But I mean, Texans were the victims too, so
I think Joe Rogan's putting on a Leatherface mask and pretending to have psychosis. That's what he does every week.
after he takes his brain pills.
But Andy, back me up on this part of it.
Like
this movie kind of sets up for the first time, like the fact that people living in Austin that have probably moved from elsewhere are terrified of people in the rest of Texas.
Exactly.
Because they're like all bullied and stuff. Like if I didn't leave Texas when I did, I would have ended up in Austin. My family moved from Texas to Connecticut, which is a big shock. Because and we're not talking like Connecticut, part of Connecticut, but we're talking like
what states are we gonna? What states are we gonna have?
Like this big? What on earth are you talking about?
What states are we gonna have fans left?
If you've never Connecticut is just so weird. It's like the size of a postage stamp, but it takes like 14 hours to drive across it because if one person has an accident, one part of the postage stamp, the whole state's screwed. Like all the roads are backed up. I can't explain this.
Yeah, no, all right.
So you live like 30 minutes away from the snooty part of Connecticut, is what I'm hearing.
Well, probably closer, depending on. Because when I was in Massachusetts, I was definitely in the snooty part. I was in Great Barrington, which is where like all the rich and famous come up from New York City.
So Massachusetts has the snooty part of Connecticut?
But no, I was right next. I was right on the border.
Okay.
You never heard of the Great Annexation?
Oh. See, I don't know how you. I don't know.
I was like right on the border. So like
yourself.
you cross into Connecticut, and it's like old money, and in Massachusetts it was like new money, but from New York, like people who made it on the stock market, actors, musicians. So like I was always meeting like I actually had a kind of friendship with what's his name? He had the movie reviewer with the mustache and the curly hair.
Todd?
No, the famous one who's like on The Critic and stuff.
Jeff?
No, like he wrote
like
major papers.
On The Critic with John Lovitz. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah. He played himself on The Critic. Like that's how famous he was. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah.
But like he was friends with Walter Matthau, who lived a town away from me, and James Taylor lived around me, and I met Harrison Ford several times because he lived there. And
were you living there in like the the 1970s? Like
no, well, I did meet a pharaoh too, but But no, just people would come up there. So Massachusetts was new money, Connecticut was old money, and then across because we're also right on the New York State border.
We've lost the plot on this,
and New York State was all the rednecks.
I was gonna say I'm gonna need a flow chart or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've lost the plot just like the director.
So the point is I did live much closer to the rich part of Connecticut in my life, just not when I was living in Connecticut.
I want to talk about Florida.
Florida.
Oh no.
No.
Grew up in Georgia.
No.
Help.
No.
Had timeshare in Florida.
How was the traffic?
I don't know. My dad would always get us drive like in the middle of the night, and we'd sleep all the way there. So I have no clue.
Okay.
Except for the one time we did it from Connecticut to Florida, where I did it in the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah, you did it in the back of a pickup truck.
Oh yeah, we rode the whole way down through New York City. It was great.
Oh,
tell us more about that.
Okay.
There were no chainsaws involved. It wasn't really that exciting.
Okay. So one of the first things that kind of made me go, that's not that scary, except it kind of is, was when they were talking about head cheese.
Sorry, that was a noise.
Yeah. Have any of you had head cheese?
It's just sausage, right?
No, it is not sausage.
Oh.
So I went and visited a friend in Germany, and her mom decided to be really nice to the guests that she had there and cook a really special meal. And it was head cheese.
Their head cheese.
And yeah, they called it. They had a different name for it. It didn't translate to head cheese. But I came downstairs and there was a whole pig's head, just in a skillet on the stove, just like sitting there kind of heating up, I guess. And that scared me. And so I tried to go eat something else that night. I told my friend, I said, just tell your mom that Americans can't go 48 hours without eating McDonald's. Okay. And it's that looks like
I
Schwartenmagen.
just it.
Yeah. So it is like they take all the bits out of it, the meat, the gristle. There's some maybe parsley in there too, and then they make a gelatin out of the bones, and it's served cold. It's Jello. It's gristly Jello, and it was and is to this day the most unsettling thing I have ever tasted. But having eaten that, I am really down to try anything. I'm just very okay. Yeah, we can try that. It'll be fine. But when he's sitting there describing it like it's really horrific, I'm sitting there thinking of my very hospitable German friend's mother, making this
slaving.
Yeah, really an act of love to make the head cheese. It's a really labor-intensive act.
Well, it seemed like in their case, it was also a really love and labor-intensive act. Now it seems like no, but it seems like in this case, there were probably people in it, but it did seem like they were very proud of their head cheese. It seems like they were, really
it's environmentally conscious. You're using more of the animal.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, they were also recycling everything, really, like people, animals. We kind of just let our people rot on the ground, but they were creating furniture out of them. IKEA lamps that at one point, which is another of the Ed Gein things, is that he had a lamp in his basement made out of a human face.
I actually kind of wish now that he had IKEA names for all of his furniture. It's like, what's this? This is my Bork. And over there's my Schlafenkagen.
By the way, I put you guys in charge of leading this episode, so
Then I want to talk about the parts I hated.
Y'all are like herding cats.
Yeah, we just need a laser pointer.
Yeah. All right, Amanda.
Yes.
I know you've got a good issue here. I've talked about my issue being the hillbilly representation.
Yes.
And Andy only partially backed me up on that. Acting like it was Midwesterners who went and messed up Texas.
That's true.
I go down there every year just to mess it up. Just go to Texas.
Technically speaking, cheese, Wisconsin, and people up there. So
goddamn Packer fans.
All right, Amanda.
So this movie has it out for creepy people. And as the resident creepy person, I'm offended. But
what?
Sorry. Before I knew the hitchhiker was a villain, I was just like, wow, they're really mean to him. He's just trying to share his interests.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that they were making connections between Franklin, who I think is just kind of a nice, weird, handicapped boy, like an annoying person to be around, I'm sure, but
portrayed terribly. Like
I think that they were trying to make a connection between that hitchhiker and him.
They were, because they both like knives and we're talking about the cattle and stuff. Like the movie did. So I was joking about the creepy people representation, although I am usually the creepiest person in any friend group. But that's where it started. But this movie really doesn't like people with disabilities. I mean, like from the very beginning, the hitchhiker is supposed to be incredibly off-putting and making this connection with Franklin, who's in the wheelchair, and the hitchhiker has, I don't know if it's a birthmark or what on his face. Like, can you talk about more trite movie villain trope than some kind of disfigurement on the face?
Mm-hmm.
Which there are people who have giant birthmarks and other defects.
Port wine.
Yeah, other defects on their
Birthmark,
face.
yeah.
And, like, I knew the sweetest woman who would wouldn't be in family photos, and like it's really affects people.
Or Gorbachev, he teared down that whole wall just to be nice. Mr. Gorbachev. All right, there's our Reagan connection.
Can't get through an episode without Reagan.
Apparently,
like,
yeah, but so Franklin is sort of the perspective character from the beginning of the movie up until people start parting ways and find the house that the Leatherface family lives in and all that. But he is not shot as sympathetic for the audience. Like you've been saying, Forrest, he's annoying. The friends and his sister are annoyed that he's there and are talking down to him, and
he goes on like a 3-minute long raspberry spree.
Yeah.
Just
like, this is not representation anyone is asking for.
Which is also what the hitchhiker and Franklin are, after seeing that the hitchhiker run after the car and go and do that over and over and over again, you see Franklin doing it at the bottom of the house, and it definitely cements that connection.
They're very purposely drawing a parallel there.
Yeah.
It's not a positive one. And then you have Leatherface, who was in part acted based on an autistic stereotype.
Well, the hitchhiker was based on
the actor's
schizophrenic nephew.
Yeah, like, it's just terrible to people.
Which, to be fair to whoever, like, I guess Tobe Hooper and whoever is creating the film, is not something that they'd written in. It's something that the actor that played the hitchhiker, because there was a very
he looked at the writing and said, "Oh, this is like my schizophrenic nephew."
Yeah. So that's that's problematic on his part. I think. I don't think that you wouldn't know that story. Like, it's not like that story is written into the script. You know what I mean? Like, that's on the part of the actor going, "Hey, I found my motivation. I have a nephew that's schizophrenic, and this is just like him." So
but also directors and producers do give notes, right? And it seemed like they were more than happy to take it that direction.
Not so much in this case, I don't think. They had 30 pages of a script. They had 30 pages.
Actors portraying different people. I mean, so you have the hitchhiker, and Leatherface, who have both some kind of mental illness or developmental disability.
Yeah.
Underneath the abuse and the cannibalism and the implied inbreeding.
I don't think this movie is positive to people with disabilities. I think
At
the
all.
exact opposite. I'm just,
Exactly.
like putting it into context. I think that I don't necessarily think that, it's like written in as a director where an actor finds their motivation. It seems like very little was actually written for these actors, and they were just kind of set loose to find this motivation, to find their disability wherever it may have resided.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And you see the influence that Texas Chain Saw Massacre has had on horror movies since its release. I mean, it's one of the first examples of the final girl with Sally making it away at the end, and the whole
which gives some respect to Jamie Lee Curtis, and don't lay all the final girl stuff at her feet.
Yeah, but like this really was very influential. I mean, we talked about the Blair Witch Project and tons of other movies
Houses.
that I haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
But also it has a negative influence as well. Like, as much as the final girl is an interesting character, the continued use of disfigurement as being a signifier of
danger,
horror and danger and evil, it's just nasty. I mean, you see the same, like there was a heavily featured facially disfigured man in Midsommar.
Well, it's almost like they're trying to do the uncanny valley phenomenon with actual humans.
Yeah.
And that's not what uncanny valley is supposed to be. Like, the creepy thing is the thing that's not actually a human. Mm-hmm. And these are all actually humans. And they tried to make them look unfamiliar enough as to replicate a sense of dehumanizing them.
Yeah. Like, I think the movie would have been a lot more interesting for me personally if it had started following the perspective of Leatherface, because there was that one scene where he's responding to all of these strangers showing up at his house that he's having to kill. And I was like, that's interesting, actually. Yeah. He's not happy about this situation.
And I think that it kind of places the genre, I guess, the slasher genre into yet another category, because we've been tracking the categories of these movies throughout our entire, Murder Night Extravaganza problematic consumption of many of these movies. So I think that this is a good time to bring this up. We started out, I mean, one of the first ones is Halloween, and it's kind of accidentally, but still kind of sets the template for, like, you have sex, you die, as like a trope in these movies. And then, we went into a whole thing about John Carpenter and how, he and his girlfriend had written this movie together, and that wasn't their intention. And I think that Jamie Lee Curtis has kind of been affected by the fact that this has been perceived as the intention. And then Friday the 13th kind of took a similar track and then kind of ran with it, and a lot of these other movies ran with it. So that's like the first rule. Then we did Nightmare on Elm Street, which is kind of the you fall asleep, you die rule, which is, I think, the most terrifying of the many
that one's
genres of slasher movies. Like, I think that the idea that, because I think that you can obviously avoid, you could just be you could be Joker and you can not have sex for the whole movie, right? Like, and nothing
Nightmare on Elm Street movies do deal with sex a lot, though.
Yeah, but it's I mean,
not the catalyst for the
so, but like, there's no rule that if you do that, you know what I mean? Like, that's what happens. So if you fall asleep, you die one, I think, is the most terrifying that we've tracked, because you can't not fall asleep. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no matter what you do, at some point you're going to fall asleep, and then you have to confront this. This is kind of a third rule. This is like the don't go on someone else's property, don't go into that old house rule. Which,
well, no, it's don't go into rural America.
Yeah.
I think in this case it definitely
because
is.
the public spaces were dangerous.
The gas station, and I think it was the sheriff who was drunk and lying on the grass at the graveyard or something.
Yeah.
Like, it's not contained to
but they warn you up until the point where you enter that space, right? Like, at the gas station, he says, don't go messing around no old house. Presumably presumably, I mean, I don't know for sure. Like maybe he would have just kidnapped them from the gas station. But that's not really what it seemed like. It seems like it's a classic, you know, in horror stories in American folklore, there is a lot of turn around, don't go further mythology, right?
Like even the idea of picking up hitchhikers, though.
Yeah.
Because before they ever even get to the gas station, before they get to the grandpa's house, before they get to the Leatherface house, there's the hitchhiker in the middle of rural nowhere on a long stretch of empty road who starts playing with knives and bringing out gunpowder and blood.
Which is a very 70s. I mean, you know, you had the free love, like 60s pick up a hitchhiker decade, and you're entering a far more reactionary, number one, serial killers, pretty much like, you know, behind every corner, Zodiac killer, like all these different serial killers kind of popping up during the 70s. And I think a lot of it obviously is sensationalized media, but like, you know, that is a common theme throughout the 70s. You have this this rejection after kind of the Manson murders of this more free love, like, oh, let's just pick someone off the side of the road. Like I remember
I picked up hitchhikers.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like
I said that's true.
I'm saying like there's a very open period, right, where people are willing to pick up hitchhikers on the side of the road. Things are kind of seen as an adventure. All these different things. Like I remember I had a therapist, and my dad actually moved there recently, but I have a therapist that went back and forth to Woodstock a bunch, which Woodstock obviously didn't take place in the town of Woodstock. My dad moved to the town of Woodstock, but you know, I live near Woodstock, like where both the town is and the festival took place, and you know, all of these older hippies remember music festivals, and they would just pick people up off the side of the road, bring them to the music festivals. Whoever it was, they would let them come into their house. They would shower. They would, you know, so it's all these different things. And at the beginning of the 70s, after like the Manson murders, which is the first, like really like, you know, sensationalized, these are hippies that will kill you moment that ends that decade.
Yeah, Zodiac killer and there's that one in California.
There's
Garden State
Killer.
Yeah, I mean there just seemed like a bunch of
just
them
got found out right recently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he went dormant because he became a cop
From a true crime podcast.
Yeah, from what's that comedian?
But you know, there was
Patton Oswalt,
his wife.
Yeah, Patton, yeah, his now deceased wife that at the end of her life revealed.
But it wasn't just Manson. There were a lot of other factors like the satanic panic and what Son of Sam.
That came much later though.
It did, but the groundwork was being laid, like I said, with the whole idea of I mean, it's just it kind of reinserted the witch hunt back into our minds, and witch hunts are dangerous.
Yeah,
like they're
the
not actually.
It's like you're kind of conflating a bit.
Total witch hunt.
You know, it's a bit of it was the later part of the 70s when they started really preying on the fears of like children disappearing, which then led into satanic panic. So we're a little you know, this is 1974, so we're still closer to the 60s than we are to the 80s.
But they're also, but you know, in the 60s you also had a lot of pagan ritual as like kind of part of a spiritual awakening. And you see this turning away from the like open-hearted spiritualism of pagan ritual that was starting to spread in the hippie movement, and you start to see the kind of fear-mongering representation of ritualistic elements from pagan traditions.
Yeah, and yet another thing that you can kind of track with this. I don't know if you guys have read any of Rick Perlstein's books, but you know, throughout I mean, there's the civil rights movement throughout the 60s, and starting in 1968, well, a little bit before that, but 1967, 1968, there starts to be the white backlash to the civil rights movement, which is kind of one of the same like, you know, it's this the idea of like counterculture, civil rights, being open-hearted, like, you know, like real, like feeling like you're on the side of progress, all of a sudden turns to a backlash that elects Nixon in 1968. So like you're seeing this far more conservative wave politically start at the tail end of the 60s, making sure that, that decade where things seem like maybe they would change, tail ends there. And I think that looking at, the sensationalized accounts of serial killers throughout this decade, the sensationalized accounts of, everything you should really be terrified of, being afraid that, picking up hitchhikers, that lead to you dying or being murdered or being stabbed and ending up in the hospital, or
the security obsession.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not too many years later that they start, what is it? Stop and frisk policing.
Mm-hmm.
They start to up the police force. I mean, specifically that's talking about New York City, but and that spread all over the country.
Well, and class and race are so tied into those.
The drug war
subjects.
starts.
Yeah,
and it's never rich, inbred, cannibalistic hicks.
No,
it's the poor hicks.
It's the poors.
But what I'm putting forward by this is that, the tail ending of this and this kind of fear mongering of really any aestheticization, I guess, of these different, modes of, openness, I guess, modes of the hippie movement, or just people kind of traveling around, picking up hitchhikers in whatever, capacity they did. All of that becomes ways that you can fearmonger which is why kind of the horror genre, I think this kind of, slasher movies kind of take off within this period.
Well, horror is one of the best mirrors of society, because the horror director has their finger on the pulse of what is actually scaring,
or is trying to
scaring America at the time, and well, if it's an American horror movie, but they're always political. They're always really what's the underlying fear here, and sometimes it's hard to enjoy horror that's not written for your era because that's not your deep down fear. But there's also a question of when they make horror that way, is it really feeding into a really negative narrative that was already building in the mind? I mean, is it actual propaganda?
Is it commentary, or is it feeding the scare?
Right. Yes. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult to suss that out in horror movies. But I think it really is important. I mean, you can enjoy horror movies. I enjoy horror movies. This wasn't my favorite, but it wasn't bad for a horror movie either. But it is really important to discuss what's being represented in horror movies, because if you don't, it's getting you in a subliminal way. Not science fiction type subliminal messages, but it is designed to hit you in a place that maybe you don't realize you have,
and it can confirm those biases. Yeah,
it's designed to hit you that way.
If you already think that people in wheelchairs are sort of
creepy
immature
or something,
and annoying,
yeah,
then this will just be
if you think men who put on makeup are creepy and scary, it's going to fuel that fire. And every horror movie in specific really needs to be sussed out, because it's giving you a message that you're already primed to hear.
And it deals
because
with
it wouldn't sell if you weren't already primed to hear it. Nobody would go to that movie that didn't hit at their deepest, darkest fears.
And I think that kind of as we've done this, we've done an R8 job tracking that out. I mean, at least in the 70s. Well, because we did Halloween, we did Nightmare on Elm Street,
and Halloween is very specifically slasher, and this movie very specifically isn't, for one reason alone, because this is harkening back to specifically exploitation films, like I said before, but also the fear of nature, which was a big thing that was underlined in horror for a long time through the suburbanization of America, and then in the 1978, John Carpenter made the suburbs what's scary, and that's where slashers kind of pick up.
This is a much more don't tread on me style of
Yes.
horror, right? Like it's
Yes.
don't go, which is why I think I've put these movies into different categories. I think the like You Have Sex, You Die category of horror movies is very specifically speaking to a lot of Americans that felt safe for a very long time, and these suburbs are being created throughout that time, and people are kind of experiencing unprecedented wealth, or unprecedented, at least like middle class.
Yeah,
money.
well, I mean, you're right at the end of it too. Like it started.
Yeah.
It's the '70s was like this slow kind of crumble between the gas shortages and
And you see that in this movie too. I mean, the fact that it doesn't have gas, I don't think represents the gas storage.
Like the first 5 minutes of the movie, I'm going to spoil.
But but you do see the fact that they're switching from doing the mallet style of killing of cattle to the air gun. Like it's deindustrialization in that case. The things are being now automated. You no longer need this sinister force just hitting the cattle over the head over and over again. You now are further into the industrial process, and because of that, this family seems to be put out of work. Now, I'm not going to assume that. I mean, I'm sure that they had some pagan, hillbilly stuff.
The
if
Illuminati
you looked at those characters, if you looked at those characters, I'm sure that they would say before that this stuff was still happening for those specific characters, but it still seems like the catalyst for them, the cannibalism seems to be getting fired and kind of laid off from the.
I don't know, because the gas station, the cook had a job not at the cattle yard. I don't know.
Yeah, but being a gas station attendant and having a
and barbecue cook.
Yeah, it's not the same as a factory job. It didn't.
That's true.
Like the loss of factory jobs to go into the service industry is a major part of the driving poverty in some of the poor parts of America for 50 years now.
Yeah, no, it hits this point of what Pascal Robert from This Revolution calls the 50-year counter-revolution. It kind of
I was hoping you'd do an impersonation of him.
No, I will never do that. I cannot do that. And if I tried to do that, bad things would happen to me. As in, I wouldn't get to host their show, him and Jason's show every month as a movie host. So I think that they make sure to show you that the economics of this part of rural Texas is based around the fact that, number one, the grandfather, they make sure to show you that the grandfather is a cattle farmer. He has cattle. He brings them to the slaughterhouse. Then, presumably the grandfather on the cannibal family's side, they're the cattle that he gets paid for. He slaughters those cattle. They get made into the head cheese. They get made into the barbecue. They get sold off. Whatever is going to happen to the.
They use the hides.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, transport everything to the meats of Fort Worth or wherever, because Fort Worth was a big distribution hub of meat.
So presumably the air gun lessens the amount of the price of the cattle they're going to get, because they can do it a lot faster. Presumably the grandfather is old anyway, but the family would have probably taken that as a role that they continue to do and been the slaughterers of the cattle. They get laid off from the one thing that they're really trained to do, and because they're so they're so intertwined with that style of killing, that style, like the slaughterhouse itself, they switch to having people as their main mode of getting food.
But see, how telling is it in this time when you're seeing deindustrialization or automation, whichever, or exportation of jobs overseas, but you're seeing the factories close down, like Billy Joel said. And in this time when the people who are being harmed the most by America's economy, rather than being framed as people that we need to strengthen our social welfare system or have better socialism, right? Mm-hmm. instead of being like, let's take care of them, it's like, well, these bastards will eat you if you get close. You know?
Yeah, well, it's a reactionary cultural backlash taking place at the same time as an economic shortening, and it's it's definitely sad that happened. It's definitely a lot of it is in response to the war on poverty and the fact that I mean, it's tied up so intrinsically with the civil rights movement, which not that those things, it's tied up intrinsically in the sense of like, it's very easy to end those programs and go, guess what? Guess who's benefiting from those programs? Black people. Do you want black people to benefit from those programs? And, poor whites also benefit from those programs. That point isn't raised at all.
But they're also
in that. So they're scaring you. They're scaring you from all sides.
Yeah. They're also trying to depict poor whites as being some sort of not polite society,
as has always been the case. I mean, if you really like,
but they're specifically doing it there.
So here's my question: why was Leatherface wearing a collared shirt, tie, and slacks? This confuses me. He killed
Sunday
3
dinner
people wearing a necktie, and this is the farming family.
Well, at the towards the end, it's a dinner party. He's dressed in his best.
He changes outfits.
Well, maybe that was the.
Well, y'all don't do that whenever you have guests over.
You wear a tie to the slaughterhouse.
It could have been their uniform. Thought of as the uniform by someone who never worked in a slaughterhouse.
I was
you dress up and go to work
by the outfit.
Yeah.
I don't know that Leatherface ever worked for the slaughterhouse. Do you know that?
He was still taking up the mantle of his grandfather or father.
You could do that at home, amateur style.
Yeah.
He also embodies, characters from whatever mask and clothing he's wearing. So like, at some point he takes on the feminine role of the grandmother or, the matriarch figure when he's cooking the food, and he has makeup on his face, and they added the makeup on purpose for that reason. So you could see that he's taking on that feminized role.
And before then, he was taking on the role of an office temp. Okay.
Well, it's all in part 4. They said it was all because of the different faces he was wearing at the time.
So they said that in the documentary too.
So it was like somebody from the office.
They said that in the documentary of the movie itself. Like
but they explicitly said it in part 4. They hint at it in this movie, but it's explicitly said in part 4.
I mean, you picture a butcher, and that's not what I'm picturing.
Well, doesn't your local butcher wear a tie?
I don't know. But
I don't like him. I don't like him pigeonholed into just being a butcher. He seems to be, a caretaker of the property. He seems to be, someone that's curing everything. He seems to be someone that's really doing a lot of work around the house, and just putting him in the position of a butcher. I don't think that's an accurate position.
I think
butchers
the
don't
day
just keep
those
women in the
3 kids
freezer.
showed up, his main job was butcher.
Well, I find having the different masks and the different roles and stuff kind of interesting, because if you bring it back to the, kind of the portrayal of rednecks and hillbillies, what we would more commonly call now white trash.
I think there's a difference.
There is a difference
of those things.
Yeah. I mean, redneck implies a lot of manual labor that white trash doesn't.
Yeah.
Like if you want to get real specific about it, my dad is redneck because he worked outside most of his life, and his neck is very much a different color than the rest of them.
Yep. But go on. I know what you're saying.
You're right. But more or less, what's interesting about the portrayal is if you look at it through what Forrest was saying, where there's a change in technology, and they're basically seen as being unable to keep up. It's kind of an odd portrayal in the sense that it makes it to where almost it doesn't matter if they change. Like it takes away the ability for what's perceived as the underclass of the United States. It doesn't matter if they change. They can't get away from whatever it is, whatever stereotypical, let's say archetype they seem to portray. which it's interesting because again, it's very reactionary. Basically, the point is you don't help them because you can't help them.
Do you think anything of the fact that they're apparently inbred and there are no women in the family?
Yeah, right.
So
Basically the notion is that you can't help them, and not only will they not assimilate into society, they can't, and so then they have to pick from their own, more or less, and try to continue themselves through, I wouldn't even say primal. It's just very, they perpetuate themselves through taboo means.
Yeah.
Almost.
I mean, like this kind of story of inbred Hicks who murder cannibals or whatever, it shows up in so much more media. Like before recording, I was talking to Amy about it. There's an episode in the X-Files, there's an episode in Supernatural where the big baddies aren't even monsters. They're just inbred Hicks who want to eat people. And in the X-Files, specifically, the way they're keeping the lineage going is the sons are making babies with mom.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say there's a book by Nancy Eisenberg called White Trash, where it documents sort of the perception and the acceptance of the existence of sort of this underclass, if we can call it that, where America, for example, first off, if you go into the history of the United States of America in general, when they first sent settlers over here, they didn't send their best. They sent their own underclass.
They're not sending their best. They're sending crime. They're sending drugs.
Well, yeah.
They're pilgrims.
I mean that
I assume are nice people.
right. And so, but they were sent here explicitly to die. They were seen as fertilizer, is the term that they were constantly sort of categorized as.
Some people. I think that there was a class division within the early United States that kind of was comparable to parts of England.
Well, exactly. The point,
slavery.
Right. The point was to send over people who weren't desired, so that the people who were higher up who wanted to come over could come over to a place that was already basically being worked through, taken care of. God forbid an aristocrat has to cut down a tree or something.
Religious parties.
Right. And so ultimately this seems it's a long history, and it's a very unrecognized history, but I think it's almost as much as I hate to say it, it's almost an unconscious aspect of the aesthetic of the United States, where there seems to be a crossover from regular society, and then this underclass place. It's never going to change. It doesn't matter what kind of technology. Technology just hurts them. Progress just hurts them, and that seems to be something that plays out in this movie.
Who won the goddamn revolution? That's what I want to know.
Right. and so and ultimately, that's why I find that it's so interesting that Leatherface has different faces. And there's the whole. He does so many different things, but basically the idea is like, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how talented he is. Talented. And it doesn't matter what he does. It doesn't
I don't
matter.
Like that. I don't like that talented. He cooks. He butchers.
No, the cook cooks.
He chainsaw.
And he's not even the best killer. Grandpa is.
I thought that Grandpa being the best killer thing was a little convenient, so she could get out of there.
Well, yeah.
Right.
Family gatherings issues.
Right. Yeah. And
I didn't like how they treated people who clearly have Parkinson's in that scene.
It was all bad.
It was all bad.
All right. So
yeah.
I do want to take a little bit time here to ask everybody if they could give us their Ubrick rating. And you're all familiar with this, yes? The Ubrick. It is your nonverbal expression of how you felt about this movie. Forrest?
See, but all right. So I mean this in both a positive and a negative way. I don't think it was a good movie, but my the ear that I give it is also that I do think that it fulfilled the psychological and emotional torment that it meant to give to its audience.
All right.
I think that there are definitely, as we've discussed throughout this, very problematic things about it. I don't think that all of them are necessary.
Justify your noise, man.
Yeah.
I know, but I wanted to contextualize my noise. I don't want it to be the same as like this movie sucks, and I'm saying this movie sucks. I want it to be I do think that it achieved
You can enjoy bad things.
I felt
like bad things too.
I felt sick for the next 2 days after watching it the first time. I had there was just a part of me that every time I heard like a chainsaw noise would viscerally just curl up into just disgust. So I want to give it that props.
How many leaf blowers you got in your neighborhood?
Oh, everybody in my neighborhood has a chainsaw.
Leaf blower massacre. Go.
All right.
Andy, do you have an Ubrick rating?
First I want to do my impression of what my college roommates would have been after he drank too much. We would watch a lot of exploitation films, and he would get drunk, and he'd just be like, "This is so sad. Those are real people dying." And Chris, bro, I love you. But, anyways, just had to throw him under the bus. But mine's not that much different.
I mean, Cannibal Holocaust, which is like the most famous exploitation film. You know, the filmmakers were tried in Italy and had to literally prove that. I was listening to oh
no, Faces of Death is where he lost.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you've seen Faces of Death, I just don't see how you can really be disturbed by this.
Yeah, no, I was I saw Faces of Death. I don't remember Faces of Death because that's how drunk I was.
Yeah,
I had to be told the next day that Chris broke down crying that everybody died.
But I think Cannibal Holocaust led to a trial in Italy where they had to actually prove that the deaths that they showed were fake deaths. It's a pretty. I mean, and there's also like that film Snuff that was famous that had to kind of do some there's a whole bunch of different films in this genre that also another movie that is very, very unnice to people with disabilities, but kind of started off this genre, I think, is Freaks, like the One of Us movie. Yep. So I think that there's a lineage to it that does have to be understood in a context where, much like watching videos online of people actually dying now, like every
that's
teenage.
What Faces of Death was. It was before somebody collected videos of people dying.
So I think in the same way that it's in the same way that teenagers now watch incredibly violent videos of people being killed online. These exploitation films, because you couldn't really necessarily get like videos of actual people dying online, or or in general, like you would.
The internet sucked in the 70s. Porn.
It was only in Chile. And then within a year of the 70s, or 2 years of the 70s, there was a coup.
Andy, you're getting off easy here. I didn't hear a noise, man.
Oh, okay. So my face is like,
I like it. I like that noise. That's a good one.
Like
is that the noise the dinosaur made that you saw on the road?
Yeah.
Charlie.
It's a low groan that I had to make louder. But yeah.
Amanda.
Okay.
Made
me angry.
Made you angry. Made me angry too. Look what his brother did to that door. I was incensed by that moment.
I'm a knife enthusiast.
Which, by the way, I have to say this at the end of this. This is the most pre-AIDS movie I've ever watched in my fucking life. And
I like seriously. I was moderately grossed out by this movie. I guess I would go like,
Yeah.
That's like, the same like sensation I think I felt, because I didn't like the sickening I felt wasn't like, which is a good name for a horror movie.
The finger sucking was really gross to me.
Yeah.
The hitchhiker cutting his own hand, for some reason, that grossed me out more than some of the murders.
I went.
What's weird is like this has nothing on the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where they actually take a razor blade and slit an eyeball.
That's one of the first.
I don't even want to talk like hearing about that.
Yeah, it was like Salvador Dali, I think, directed it, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
That's the first. I mean, that's really like the first horror movie, or at least one of the first horror movies like ever created in general. Like this exploitation strain to those movies has been going on forever. Like this feeling that you're watching something that and I think really, I mean, even as far back as the Great Train Robbery, when people were afraid that the train was coming right towards them in the theater, and actually people like had literal like heart palpitations and heart attacks, feeling like they were going to get run over by a train because they hadn't seen something like that on the screen.
I mean, Wizard of Oz, they theaters would actually have to like change the seats every showing because people would just piss themselves during the flying monkey scene, because that was just terrifying.
That's an understandable reaction to the flying monkey.
Actually,
yeah,
that is so amazing. And see, like, I watched Friday the 13th movies as a kid. My Nana used to like put on Friday the 13th movies, and we'd watch them, and then she'd say she heard something outside and send me to go look around the back of the house to see if there was like intruders, and then she would like hide in the bushes with a rake. So like jump scares are kind of like, I was raised on them.
Yeah,
that's okay.
So
I
haven't
went camping once as a Boy Scout, and we were all telling ghost stories, and they kept telling us that this is where they filmed Friday the 13th. We were at the set of Camp Crystal Lake, and it was the 80s. We couldn't check and find out if that was true. So Saturday night, we're all sitting around telling ghost stories, and one of the guys comes out in a mask, screaming out of the woods. And everybody jumps up and runs away screaming. And I just sat there for a moment going, oh, that's just Steve. Wait, that knife looks pretty real in the moonlight. Oh, man, what if it really is a killer? I'm just sitting here and he just kills me. I better run. So I stand up, turn around, trip over the bag of charcoal, and knock myself unconscious.
He got you.
So I haven't watched this far into the Friday the 13th movies, but A New Beginning, Debbie Voorhees, that was one of the main actresses in it, is going to come on for our final slasher. Yeah, her last name is Voorhees. You're like Jason Voorhees.
Wow.
You pronounced weird. Can you say that again? How'd you say it the first time?
I said Voorhees.
Voorhees. You had like an extra syllable.
All right. Well, so she's
rewind the tape, everybody.
She's coming on for our final slasher show, and she's made a film called I think it's like 13th Fanboy or something, which is
or Fanboy 13, I think.
But yeah, so
I was watching the trailer earlier. It looks fun.
We only have it for half an hour, I guess, but JG is going to be on with us too. But it's a film where a killer watches all of the Friday 13th movies and decides to start stalking the cast of Friday the 13th, like all of them, and trying to murder them. And this movie is coming out on the 22nd. It's not out yet.
Huh.
So that's the I haven't watched any of it.
Fanboy 13, I think it's called.
Okay.
Very nice. Well, we are overtime for what we normally record. So I do want to remind everybody that we are professionals.
Don't watch these at home.
And then if you want to keep going, that's where our episode is going to end.
Nope, I do not want to keep going. I am perfectly fine to leave us at this point. I will say that
nauseous thinking about this movie.
I will say that I watched last night this as a double feature with Blair Witch Project, which we're having the Hit Factory podcast crossover on Thursday, where Aaron and Carly are going to come and talk to us because they do a 90s film podcast, and they've done an episode on Blair Witch Project, but they decided they want to come do a crossover with us on Blair Witch Project. So I found some interesting parallels between Texas Chainsaw Massacre and
same. We did Blair Witch Project 2 weeks ago, and it's actually really funny because my theory on the Blair Witch Project is that it really was fun as a campfire story when you watched it in 1999 and got the all the build up with it. We're like, no, these people are actually missing. And, they had interviews with people that were supposed to be cops in the area saying, no, we still can't find these kids. And they had all this build up. And then what you see with all that going on is just a campfire story, just like a guy popping out of the woods and going, scary. Like, there's no plot there. Yeah. It's just like, ooh, spooky woods.
It's supposed to be based on a true story, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
But Amanda had never heard a campfire story that had the big setup like you were talking about there, where the adults just kept talking about how, this area, there's something weird about it, like all day, and then have the jump scare,
No, the campfire stories started at the campfire during marshmallows.
No, there was.
No, you got to set it up. You got to
set it up.
Got to be built up.
Mm-hmm.
Lazy.
You got to lay that groundwork for it to work.
And I think that Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes from a similar place because watching that documentary, Tobe Hooper says when he's talking about it, says that his Wisconsin relatives would come and they realized that talking about the Ed Gein story would scare the shit out of him as a kid. So he was a little kid, and they would tell the story about this guy who would come and robbed graves and had his mother died, and
gruesome.
Yeah, so they would tell him the story, and they would get him more and more scared. And as an adult, he's trying to make a horror movie. Much in the same way I think that John Carpenter was making Halloween. It was kind of a stepping stone for him, where he just said to himself, you know what, like, I could make a scary movie, do it as a gimmick. And I think that a lot of the reactionary elements of Texas Chainsaw Massacre are there by accident, because I do think that it's somebody trying to create this aestheticization, I guess, of scariness, and it's incredibly low budget, and it made like millions more dollars than it cost to actually make it.
I'm not of the opinion that this was made under nefarious intent. Like they were trying to drive you into some sort of thought control type of thing. But the nature of the genre is such that you do need to take the time to pick out, like, why was this scary?
Yeah. And
what was it that they were trying to say was scary? Because you've got prejudices, because it's like a national zeitgeist that they're always going to capture in that.
And I think that horror movies just do that well for sure.
And talking about the Blair Witch Project, I didn't grow up with the hype or anything. Like, I already knew the twist and all the stuff just from it being in the public consciousness. And so for me, watching it, the scariest bit was imagining myself out hiking in the woods with someone who just decided to be the biggest idiot. Like, it would be bad if I were out hiking in the woods and someone threw the map away and started losing it. That's a bad scenario.
I think you're kind of, after watching it last night, and as a kid, so I grew up with, my parents had Blair Witch Project as a VHS tape, but they didn't.
What about Season of the Witch?
Oh, I saw Blair Witch 5 times in the theater.
So my parents had.
I was into it.
My parents at my grandpa's house. Grandpa's house had a VHS copy of the Blair Witch Project, and I remember them telling me over and over again how scary it was when the marketing campaign took hold. And I remember them talking about like all of that part of it. But then they were like, "Oh, but you can't watch it," and I didn't end up trying to watch it. I watched other things that they had. They definitely were like, "Oh, don't watch this." But knowing that backstory and then watching it, I was like, okay, like there's a certain level of gimmick, I think, in each generation of horror film that you know, it really comes with, number one, I mean, one of the biggest gimmicks obviously is this is a true story, and that goes back a really long time, and it's in both movies, like trying to prove to you that this is a true story, that because they just really can't afford to make they can't afford to make like a big budget horror movie, can't afford to make Psycho, let's say, where, you know, you don't necessarily, like, you're kind of watching actors that you know. But I'm saying, like, you're watching actors that you know portray these roles, and then they're like, oh, well, we're going to scare you a little bit. These are movies that the budget is so small that scaring the shit out of you is really their only route. And it's generally filmmakers that are trying to make a name for themselves, because that does very well to make a name for yourself. If you scare the shit out of everybody and created like a national marketing campaign for your movie, whether it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where everyone's like, you know, this was scary as fuck, this is like literally a guy with a chainsaw, or whether it's Blair Witch Project, where people are like, oh my god, these filmmakers are still missing. It's the same kind of gimmick where for the first time these young filmmakers are making a name for themselves. And they definitely do capitalize on some very reactionary elements going on at the moment. I mean, missing kids in the 90s, like.
Well, but if you don't, you're not making horror right. I mean, that's the thing. The genre is designed to be reactionary. Like,
you can make Get Out
if it's not.
You can make Get Out, and you could capitalize on who likes white people at this point.
One of my favorite horror movies I've seen in theaters was Hide and Seek, which is all about class divide, and the main character is marrying into a rich, well-to-do family, and she does not come from that background, and their willingness to sacrifice her to maintain their wealth. That was a wonderful horror movie.
Yeah.
Loved the heck out of it. Was scared, had fun, and the message was awesome.
All right, and with that, I'm going to leave our episode because we've hit this 1 hour and 42 minutes point. I think I've said all I need to plug. I mean, if anyone else wants to plug anything,
media, we love reviews, comments, interaction. I'm sure I'm speaking for everybody.
Yeah.
So these are bad movies. These are bad movies on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. _bad and YouTube. And then I know Charlie RC Roberts' stuff to plug. Although at the beginning of the show,
I was gonna say as at the beginning, so at the end. I have
Fettuccine Alfredo on Substack.
Anime. Come on, get around.
Ferocia Animi. It's on Substack. It also has a page on Facebook and Instagram. And we have a very lacking Twitter presence because Twitter's not a real place.
No,
So,
it isn't.
but yeah, Ferocia Animi. The Substack is ferocia.substack.com. And
I bet if John Ross aggressively tweets it, enough people
I make people mad anyway. So once Twitter finds out about me, I'll have to wear a mask. Cover my
And
face.
actually, the Ferocia Anime Anima. I can't say the second.
Ferocia Anime.
Shut up. Shut up.
The Enema Substack.
Konnichiwa. Hey, Bobby.
Oh,
That's a good place to get into an all-out brawl with me.
Oh yeah.
yes, it
Like,
is.
I'll be nice to you on my page, but on Charlie's page, I'm like, this is garbage.
Well,
Yeah, movies on our podcast, but Charlie gets into politics and all kinds of stuff in his writing.
right, and I mean, you know, it's
And
been said. I had
about Dave Chappelle at this point.
Oh,
well,
Which I am
it
now
will
canceled.
be.
I am now canceled by proxy for defending Kenzo, defending Dave Chappelle.
Well, I was about to say that. That should be tomorrow. We'll see if I get canceled. But, I strive. I strive as a writer to what?
it shouldn't be like something to aspire to be.
It's
canceled.
not. No, it's not. I don't care.
To be fair, Dave Chappelle seemed like that's what he was aspiring to, but he's uncancelable.
Right. Well, I was gonna say, I don't particularly.
He already got the millions. Like you can't cancel someone who already got their full Netflix.
Yeah.
Right. All I was gonna say is that I strive to live up to a rejection letter, or rejection email that I got for an article where I was told that I abused the reader. That's what I strive to do. So that's why when you go onto the Ferocia Animi page, it's a free for all.
We can't say words at all at this point.
Well, what I strive for is not to have my dad tell me that look what I did to that door. So that's where I'll leave it.
We have Andy has plug.
Andy, do you have plugs?
Just real quickly, if you saw the episode artwork today and you'd like to see more, there is a comic book, which I know the Kickstarter just ended, so you should be able to still order it or something. I did a variant cover of the first issue of Duretti, Shadow of the People, and Ben Burgess's book on Christopher Hitchens. I did the cover of that as well. And you can pre-order.
You're all canceled.
You can pre-order that on Red Emma's right now. You can do it on Amazon too if you want, but Red Emma's is a workers co-op, so we're gonna
right. Yes, right.
We're gonna plug that. And
that's where I got my copy of Against the Web.
Yes, which I also did the cover of that.
Yeah.
So if you like the artwork that you saw of the drawing of Leatherface with that red background and the gray skin, seek out more stuff. I got plenty of things, and follow me to see more because I'm doing this drawing and making stuff. So yeah.
And if you want Andy to eventually get paid for being on the show, patreon.com/movie night extra. I need to get paid first for this show because I'm spending a fair amount of money to get our StreamYard and to put us on pot. But at some point, if enough of you pay,
we're gonna make you pay.
I was gonna say the bottom line is girlfriend's got to get paid.
And I make an excellent head cheese. So with that, I'm going to end it and just say a good old-fashioned left is best.